Today's video is sponsored by Motion Array. Hey everyone, Flo from Off to Lens here. I'm a French-Australian filmmaker based in French Alps, and today we're going to talk about the iPhone 14 Pro. So I've had the phone for about a month now, and in this video I want to share my experience using it for video work, what I like and don't like about it, and whether or not I would recommend it for filmmakers like myself. Before I start, don't forget to subscribe to see more videos like this one, and let's get into it. So I usually don't do phone reviews, but because this new iPhone is a bit different and it's also aimed at filmmakers, I thought I would share my thoughts. This is not an in-depth technical review about the phone, as there are plenty out there. This is more about whether or not this phone can actually find a place in a filmmaking kit or in my kind of work, which consists mostly of documentary and travel content. For those of you who don't know me, I've actually been filming with cinema cameras or dedicated video cameras for years that I've never really used phones or DSLRs. My current cameras are the BMPCC 6K and the 6K Pro, but I've shot on cameras like the Canon C200, the Sony FS7, the Ursa Mini Pro, and even the Ursa 12K. So this video is about the iPhone for filmmaking, but I think it's important to remember what is filmmaking. I think these days, especially online, we confuse it sometimes with cinematography. Filmmaking is about telling stories and everything involved from start to finish. So I think the most important part is, can the iPhone do the job? So before I start, this is the iPhone 14 that I got. I decided to get the Pro, of course, so I could benefit from the Pro features, such as the better cameras, the faster chip, the brighter screen, and of course, the ProRes option. I didn't get the Max because for me, the screen at 6.1 inch is big enough. I won't talk too much about the design. It's an iPhone, it looks like an iPhone, and it feels like an iPhone. So now let's talk about why I decided to get it in the first place. Reason number one is to upgrade. So I'm not the kind of person that feels like they need to change their iPhone every year. I've actually had, up until last month, the iPhone 11 for 3 years, and it wasn't even the Pro. But I do use my phone a lot for personal applications and also for work-related stuff. I take a lot of photos and videos, as you can imagine. I spend hours per day since social media is a huge part of what I do, and since I became a dad last year, I also want to make sure that I'm able to capture memories and moments on an everyday basis. So this time I wanted to make sure that the upgrade was worth it. Not only I wanted a newer phone, but I wanted to make sure that it had better cameras, more optical zooms, and of course better video quality. Reason number two is BTS. As you know, I do a lot of gear testing and reviews for this channel, and I always need BTS content. Sometimes I don't bring my EOS R, so having great quality on a phone to take photos and even video is quite handy. And also, since we had Finn, it's a lot harder to carry multiple cameras every day, but we always carry a phone. And on actual jobs, I also have a phone with me at all times, so taking BTS photos and videos is much easier with a phone. Reason three is B-cam or C-cam. Since I do a lot of documentary work and outdoor content in general, I never know exactly where I'm going to find myself or the conditions that I'll be in. So for me, getting a phone that has the ability to shoot 4K ProRes is great, as if for some reason I cannot use the main camera or even the big cam, I can always capture content on a phone, and technically it should be decent enough. And now let's talk about the things that I like about this iPhone 14 Pro. Just a note though, I'm talking about using the phone as is without any filmmaking app like Filmic Pro. So first of all, the size. So cinema cameras these days are getting very small, especially when you compare to like 10-15 years ago or even 5 years ago, but they're definitely not as small as a phone. I've been told of so many times when I was using bigger cameras on shoots, especially in cities, but the chances are to get told off using a phone are very rare. Next is ease of use. Pretty much anyone can use a phone. We're so used to use them every single day, then filming with a phone is ridiculously quick and easy. Two very important things when it comes to filmmaking, especially in documentary situation. Then there is the quality and the recording options. The fact that you can shoot ProRes 4K on a phone is pretty crazy. Not only that, but in the right conditions, the image can actually look pretty good, especially for close-ups. Stabilization. So in the recent years, the phone have become really good at stabilizing content. Personally, I shoot a lot of my documentary and travel content handheld with cinema cameras, but it can sometimes be tricky as you need to walk a certain way or add extra gear. With a phone, you can pretty much walk normally and it'll do a good job. For my testing video, for example, I decided to hold the phone with a Joby tripod, a very small one, just so I could have the phone horizontally, but I could have just held the phone in my own hands and the results would have been pretty much exactly the same. And lastly, it's super easy to edit with. The ProRes files that are coming out of the iPhone 14 Pro are exactly the same ProRes files you would find in any other cameras that shoot ProRes. And since they are ProRes, they're super easy to use and very fast to edit with. Now let's talk about the things that I don't really like as much about the iPhone 14 Pro. Again, keep in mind this is about filmmaking. The quality. I know I've said just before that the quality was one of the things that I like. What I mean is that the quality is great for a phone, but not so much for an actual camera. Especially when you start comparing it to cameras like the BMPCC 6K or with entry-level cinema cameras like the 4K version, which is pretty much the same price. On close-ups, the image can actually be decent, but as you start filming in harsh light or even wide landscape shots with foliage, it starts to fall apart pretty quickly. The zooms can actually be quite noisy. I love using them for photos, but for video there's a drop in quality depending on the situation. As always, when viewed on the phone, the files look actually pretty good, and it's when you start watching them on a bigger monitor that you can notice how digital it looks and the over-sharpness of the image. Next is the file size. ProRes files are huge. This is the nature of ProRes and I'm used to it because I've been shooting in that format since 2014, but on a phone it's a different story. With the iPhone 14 Pro, you can only shoot in ProRes 422 HQ. You don't have the choice to shoot in standard 422 or in LT to reduce the size. To give you an idea for my test footage, for example, I shot over 2 days around 200 clips and it was 175 gigs. Then the issue is to transfer those files to your computer. I decided to use AirDrop as it was the quickest and the easiest way in my case, and it took about 2 hours. Apple says that you need around 6 gigs per minute if you shoot in 4K ProRes, so even in my case with a 512 gig phone, I can only shoot roughly 85 minutes, and that's if the phone is completely empty. And to be completely honest with you, I don't think the improvement in quality you get from using just a regular 4K video files is worth it for the file size. Now, if you could shoot log internally or even reduce the sharpness in the phone, that would probably make a difference. Then I also want to talk about dynamic range. Dynamic range on this phone can be okay at best or pretty bad. As soon as you have a wide range of light and contrast, the phone can't really handle it and it shows the limitation of the small sensor. Next is cinematic mode. This is a big selling point for Apple and I've seen loads of people like raving about it online, but to be completely honest with you, I'm not a big fan of it. On some shots, it can actually do an okay job separating the subject from the background. It gives you that false sense of depth, but most of the time it just looks so digital and forced. If the subject wears glasses, for example, it won't work on the whole face and you're left with patchy edges. I think it does an okay job on close-ups like flowers or hands, for example, and it can also work if you're following someone, but then again, you need to be pretty stable and not have a lot of movements. And lastly, auto versus manual. One thing I do like about cinematic mode though is that you are able to change your settings, so you can modify the aperture, for example, if you want to. However, if you do decide to shoot in ProRes, you are pretty much stuck in auto mode. You can modify the exposure and the frame rate, but that's about it. So basically the weird thing about this is that even though this phone is targeted as a filmmaking tool, if you want to shoot in ProRes cinema grade quality file, you have to let go of the ability to change your settings, but if you do film in cinematic mode, then you lose the ProRes files. And now a quick word about today's sponsor, Motion Array. So Motion Array is an all-in-one platform for creators where you can find pretty much everything you need to create videos, from video templates, presets, motion graphics, royalty-free music, and sound effects. So as always, there's no way I would tell you guys to use something if I didn't use it myself in a genuine way. I've been using Motion Array since last year, and over the past 8 or 9 months, every single time you've seen a title or an animation, it's been done using Motion Array. I really don't have the skills all the time to create animated titles, graphics, and templates, so this is perfect for someone like me. In addition to titles for my video sections and chapters, I also use callouts or graphs for specs or info on specific items, which works very well for tech videos like this one. It gives a little extra to the video and makes the whole viewing experience a little bit more interactive and engaging. Everything is sorted by categories such as templates, presets, or by software with Final Cut Pro, After Effects, Premiere Pro, and even DaVinci. It's super easy to use and very nicely laid out. You have the choice of a monthly subscription for $29.99 or an annual membership for $240. I have already made a dedicated video if you need more info, and feel free to use the link in the description to check out Motion Array. So who I think this phone is for, or what I think this phone is for. Personally, I think the iPhone 14 Pro is a great BTS and backup camera. It's very easy and quick to use, so this means that you can actually take photos and videos even while you're on set, for example. And as I was saying before, the iPhone can definitely be used for shots when you don't have a choice, in a city or museum, or when the conditions are so bad that you can't use your main camera. When I was in Antarctica, for example, I did shoot a bit on my phone to save battery on the other two cameras, but the shots that I was capturing with my phone were only personal content or secondary shots. Having an iPhone as a backup camera is better than nothing. For example, if weight is of paramount importance, let's say you're going on an expedition, or if you're climbing or riding a bike, for example, then a phone might actually be the right choice. Vlogging is also, for example, another form of capturing content where a phone is probably the better option. I think it's great to be able to shoot ProRes on a phone in case you really need it, or just have better quality file for personal content. I also want to add that yes, you can make the iPhone a better camera by using external apps like Filming Pro or by adding filters and gimbals, but the iPhone is such a big investment already, and that I think for someone wanting to actually get into filmmaking, it's much better to get an actual dedicated video camera and invest in that rather than a phone that would be replaced in a year or two. Also, perception is quite important, unfortunately, in the filmmaking world, so rocking up on a shoot with an iPhone is probably not the best idea. Would I recommend the iPhone 14 Pro? As a phone? Yes, definitely. As a filmmaking tool? Probably not. I don't think anyone very serious about filmmaking would get an iPhone just for that purpose. When you see those Apple commercials shot on an iPhone, they usually have the best DPs around, a best crew, a ridiculous amount of gear around, and also a lot of post-production involved. In my opinion, I don't think that a director or a DP would decide to use a phone over a proper cinema camera unless they don't have a choice, or they want to make a point for some reason, or the film is that specific, then a phone is better suited. But to circle back to the core of filmmaking, can it tell a story? Absolutely. You can shoot pretty much everything you want with an iPhone. It might not just give you the best quality, it might be harder to transfer the files or to monitor the image, but you can. It just comes back, as always, to what kind of filmmaking you do. Personally, in my case, I would always prefer to use a dedicated video camera every day, but this is just me. For now, I will use the iPhone as a BTS and backup camera or for personal content, but I probably won't use the ProRes files anymore as I can't really justify the file size for the quality. That's it for me for today, guys. Hopefully you've enjoyed this video about the iPhone 14 Pro. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know your thoughts on this in the comments below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Also, feel free to check out my new ebook, Freelance Documentary Filmmaking, An Introduction, where you can find a streamlined but comprehensive overview from pre-production all the way to marketing, built on years of my own experience shooting short documentaries around the world.